Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Free to Grow CFO podcast, where we dive deep into conversations about scaling a profit-focused D2C brand. I'm your host, Jon Blair, founder of Free to Grow CFO. We're the go-to outsourced finance and accounting firm for 8- and 9-figure D2C brands. And today, I'm here with Sean Busch, founder of DadMode, a household cleaning products brand for dads. Sean, what's happening, man?
Hey, John, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you being here. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you can see I strategically have my best dad ever mug here. Yeah, man, I'm super excited to chat today because you have a really interesting background. You've founded a couple of brands, and one of them you scaled to tens of millions in revenue, effectively bootstrapped. And as a fractional CFO firm that works exclusively with bootstrapped, fast-growing ecom brands, I think your experience is going to be, right in the strike zone of the audience who listens to the show. So I'm really excited. So before we dive in, I'd love to get kind of the high level background. If you could just walk through the audience, your high level entrepreneurial journey that ultimately led you to founding DadMode.
Sure. So I was born to two entrepreneurs. My parents were both small business owners, very small businesses, and more on the labor side of things. And grew up in Eastern Long Island, and just learned from them the ups and downs of entrepreneurialism, and how you could have good years and bad years, and a lot of the things that you saw were, where people say, "Oh wow, look how great they're doing." Those were, snippets of the life cycle of a business. Most of them were gritty and grinding and, getting up at 5 a.m. and just doing really hard things or things that just weren't fun. And, they kind of instilled in me this notion that if you want to do something on your own, you got to have that mentality, but also you got to find something that you like doing or something that you're good at. And so I started my first company when I was 16. It was a car detailing company. I was mobile. I went to everybody's house. And then I built that over a number of years. I started doing testing and development for the chemical manufacturers in that space when I was a teenager in high school. Built that business into something decent sized, and kept it going through college. It helped leverage me into a couple of my first professional careers in medical sales. And then it ended up getting me moved out from New York because one of my clients claimed that he couldn't find a good detailer. Flew my wife and I down first class, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But then by the end, I was like, "Yeah, come work for me." So I started. I started in the internet landscape at that time. I worked for his company, running biz dev for a CPG e-commerce company that was 100% self-funded. And so I learned about small business. I learned about customer-centric methodologies. I learned about the beauty of the internet and how you can sell products when people are sleeping, and you get all this amazing data on what people do when they get on their computer or their smartphones. And then I leveraged that into starting Puracy. I kind of got bored after a couple of years and wanted to start something of my own. And I started something with my neighbor in South Austin. We were both about in sort of family planning stages. He just found out him and his wife were pregnant. We were trying to get pregnant, evaluate all the products in your household. Hey, what's toxic, what's not? And then we realized there was this big gaping hole that was not really filled. There's some natural products in the household cleaning space at the time, but everything was going to stores and buying. We kind of said, I looked at it, I said, look, I think we go to Amazon. This is back in 2012 when we started talking about this. And so, FBA was brand new. Nobody was really doing much in our space. And we launched at the end of 2013, that brand, and the brand called Puracy, focused on pure ingredients in household cleaning products. And that ended up building into a brand that sold baby care products, personal care products, and then at the end, even pet care products. But we bootstrapped that company and moved into Target and Walmart stores kind of around 2019. And then we sold it a couple of years ago.
Awesome journey, man. So a couple things that I want to draw out of there. One, I was on the founding team of an ecom brand called Guardian Bikes that's still around to this day, and we launched on Amazon Seller Central in 2015. And I was the guy on there, like trying to figure out how to label shipments right to get them to FBA and get them accepted, and dealing with like that super annoying queue of like products that just get lost in the FBA system. And like, so, yeah, 10 years ago, FBA was like, what's funny is a couple years before that, we launched our site, our D2C business on Magento, which is like, takes me back. And Shopify was brand new, and we were having issues with Magento, and we had to do this quick pivot before our Shark Tank episode aired. Because like our Magento developers like were not available on the weekend, so we literally like stood up a Shopify store like over the weekend ourselves. And like, it's those kinds of things. Like, I love meeting people who have been in the game as long as you have, because I was in those early days as well, and it was like, we're just like figuring stuff out, right? Like, not really knowing what the heck we're doing, and just trying these effectively nascent platforms, right? And so anyways, I love that. The other thing you mentioned that I just want to draw out is like, you were talking about at the beginning of your journey, seeing your parents as, kind of entrepreneurs that you looked up to, and going like, I want to be an entrepreneur, and doing things that, grinding through things that you don't necessarily enjoy. And it just made me think of like, I'm a big Robert Kiyosaki fan, and he talks about in investing, which when you start a business, you're just investing in your own business, right? And you may be operating as well. But any type of investing, he says, listen, pick an asset class you enjoy, because it's the enjoyment of it that allows you to grind through the hard times, right? And so like, anyways, all that being said, I want to dive into the journey of scaling Puracy first, bootstrapped. When you think about the one or two key factors that allowed you to scale bootstrapped, what are the first things that come to mind?
Got to know your margins.
Mm.
It's so, as a consumer products business, while it's built on consumables and repeat business, that's obviously not guaranteed. So you still have to think about it from the outset of what we tried to do was solve for a break even or small profit on the first item. And then once you acquired that customer, the goal was to get them to subscribe to the product. But you needed to know, hey, if I'm purchasing this now as a small business, as a small brand at 3,000 units, what does it look like at 10, 25, 50, 100, and so on? And where do the price breaks come in, and where do you have to go? And then you go to different vendors at that point. Is your manufacturing partner good enough to scale with you, right? So you're sort of having to ask all of these questions in upfront conversations. And like you said, that was my first real startup. And so you're sort of, and my co-founder had no background in CPG or anything. And so we're sort of figuring it out as you go. And you make a lot of small missteps, but I think the thing about an early stage business is you're doing these minor pivots, sometimes more than once a day.
Yeah, continuously, right? Just like continuous minor pivots. It's the number of times we pivoted at Guardian Bikes, and probably still are to this day. That's part of being entrepreneurial. And honestly, man, like in the e-com world, like you just have to be nimble. Things change still to this day. They change constantly, right? And you're operating a lot from an acquisition standpoint. You're operating a lot on like what I call rented land. Like, when things are working on Meta, that's rented. That's a rented channel, right? The algorithm. I've seen the algorithm change on brands so many times in the last decade, and they're like, shoot, what the heck? And they eventually figure it out, but like, it can upend the brand like overnight. I've definitely seen that happen. There's a couple things you pointed out that I see time and time again that are key factors in being able to scale bootstrapped, right? The first factor is like, you have to be profitable. That's just a necessity when you're scaling bootstrapped. And you mentioned, I think, two core tenets that I see time and time again either lead to the success of profitability or lack thereof is margins and repeat purchase. And there's actually like a really tight connection between the two of those. You mentioned turning a small profit or at least breaking even on a first order and then really making up your profitability on repeat purchase. What were some of the repeat purchase like retention tactics that you guys used that you saw that were successful?
We were so dialed into what our customers wanted from a product experience standpoint to where, we really leveraged the review database of Amazon early on and started to, and now there's all these tools and things that you can kind of use for it, but we did it all manually. And part of the reason I love doing it manually was that I had my hands in it all the time. And so you start to pick up these little snippets. And when you think about it from a more formalized methodology around quantitative and qualitative consumer research, you start to see, okay, this is what people write about it, but what do they really want? What are they really trying to solve for here? And that's really the sort of path we were trying to figure out. And so I did a ton of focus groups, and you just start to find out that, hey, I wish the hand soap rinsed off better. I wish my hands didn't feel slimy after that. And so like these little things that most consumers can't articulate, and they don't understand why they like it, they just expect it. You go through that element. And then you go through things like foam height on, hey, when people wash their hands, they want it to foam up real fast. It's called flash foam. So we started to analyze all these little tiny nuances of it. And then I'd solve for them with our chemists. And then you start to talk about, ingredient safety and quality. But it was really about just listening and observing people in their natural habitat. And for Puracy, the brand was targeted at moms, or young moms, or soon-to-be moms. So there's a heightened level of emotion. There's a heightened level of hormones. Which the hormone thing was interesting because one of our early findings was that, hey, I like Mrs. Myers because they have all these great scents, but when I'm pregnant, I actually have to find a different cleaning product because the scents are so strong it makes me nauseous. And we started to hear that over and over again, and that became boom. Like that's our end spot right there. It's like create good scents, but have them be just sort of refreshing and complementary to what you're doing, but not overpowering. And that's really where we landed on that particular side of things. So I think highlighting all of these little nuanced things, because again, as much as I wanted to be, better, it was about being a little bit different. It was about sort of finding that angle in the market to where you can kind of come in and people recognize you for. So that was the pure ingredients, that was like not overpowering scent. So it just became like a brand that was very approachable and yielded a great experience through and through. It was never like, nothing was offensive about the brand or just in your face. And I love that because that's what people came to sort of expect from the Puracy brand.
So I see a lot of DTC brands who also have Amazon as a channel that struggle with driving repeat purchase, specifically on Amazon as a channel. Besides like mining the review data and kind of having focus groups and whatnot, are there any other specific tactics on Amazon specifically that helped you drive repeat purchase?
Yeah, it's tough. Amazon, even on the early days, now everybody knows that you're just sort of conditioned to one-click buy everything and have one-day shipping. But at that time, like I'd say early on, we had to pump up a lot of our inventory levels to kind of be able to allow the entire United States to have quick shipping. So that was one. It was way before Subscribe and Save. So it became this thing where we try to time our follow-ups, and you were still limited to 2 follow-ups. So we tried to time our email follow-ups on Amazon to where that was a tough one. That was, again, a moving target. Like you don't even think about it, but people buy stuff and typically they're not going to, at least in household cleaning products, they're not going to use it the second they get it. People don't usually run out. They just buy and say, all right, I have like 2 weeks left of this. So we had to time it so that it didn't feel like, hey, why are you emailing me? Like literally the box just got to my door. I haven't even opened it yet. So I think a lot of it came down to how well could we analyze our customers' habits of purchasing and then usage. And then those follow-up emails started to help with repeat purchase rates, because if there was a question or there was a concern, for the first 4 years of the company, every single thing came to me. And I made sure to sign all of the emails, all the responses, all of the customer reviews that were critical online. I signed all of them, Sean, founder of Puracy, because I wanted people to know that, yeah, like the owner of the business is the one chiming in here, not somebody who's reading off a script somewhere. And that started to turn the dial for us because you started to take a look at, again, I'll use the example, Mrs. Myers, giant organization or giant brand within a massive organization, S.C. Johnson.
Yeah,
And yeah, you're not getting Mrs. Myers responding to you.
totally. Totally.
And that for a lot of people, especially for moms, right? You got to think about the mindset and the state of mind that they're in as they're pregnant or they just have a newborn. They want to be talking to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. That's why, there's such a high touch point with doctors and things at that time period. So I just hyper focused on those elements.
So I wanna draw something out here that I talk about a lot on this show, and I talk about it a lot with our free to grow clients. E-commerce channels, and in this context we'll talk specifically about Amazon and your D2C like .com store. Those should be part of your strategy. Now that might sound like, of course, obviously, John, but what I'm saying is I see too many brands that are just like, we're going to start selling D2C or Amazon because it's just an easy channel to start selling on. But they're not thinking about what is strategic about these e-commerce channels. So like at Guardian Bikes, the reason why we launch a direct-to-consumer kids bike line is because we had a brake that prevents you from flipping over the handlebars. We were selling it brick and mortar at the beginning, and we were like, you can't tell the story of why this is safer, right? You go to a Walmart aisle, in the Walmart kids bike aisle, and there's just stuff everywhere. There's zero differentiation. We did it out of strategic necessity to explain why this bike is safer. And secondarily, but this actually became more important, is to build a direct customer relationship, right? And so the point I'm making is that what I hear you saying here is that like you're not just leveraging Amazon and D2C as sales channels for just outlets to get transactions recorded. You're actually strategically leveraging them to build a relationship that you couldn't have otherwise if you had started in brick and mortar, right? So when we were prepping for this episode, you mentioned something about uncomfortably close relationships with your customers. Can you dive into that a little bit more and how you engaged in those relationships, and then any more that comes to mind about how you leverage those for your success?
Yeah, and John, you're 100% right. Like, as much as we wanted to be more D2C focused, because look, you cut out Amazon and stuff, people are just conditioned on Amazon, especially with consumable products. So you had to do the best you could with your product presentation on Amazon, which was a differentiating factor for us in the beginning because even the big brands we competed against just didn't have good descriptions. But yes, when you went to our website, it became this treasure trove of information. And we found what happened was like our website never really had a great conversion rate because people would go to the site, research us, they'd research our team, they'd research our chemists, they'd research all of the research that we did on all the ingredients we put in our products and the ones that we refuse to put in our products. And what it does is it builds trust. And I think that's really, really important when you come to a brand that has touch point with moms and kids. So I think that, when you start to kind of build out a repeat purchase rate and like what makes an uncomfortable relationship with customers uncomfortably close, it's a couple elements. So I think one is when you convince somebody to buy your products, and we knew that we had one shot with, especially when we came out with our baby care line, like baby shampoo, baby lotion. Those products were such a binary purchasing experience. And thankfully, we tested them so rigorously in labs and with friends and obviously our families that they were very well received. But like you have this response from people when they go ahead and they're like, hey, my child has eczema. I've tried this, and this, and it doesn't work. And they come back and they're like, oh my God, your stuff is the only thing that's worked. And all of a sudden you have cheerleaders and you have people that are in fact about your products. And that is what we tried to build is we tried to build cheerleaders. And then you have situations where somebody says, hey, I like this, but like the lavender's a little bit too strong in the scent. And then you get a couple more of those comments. And then the next production run, we fix it and we dial it down a little bit. And then I go back to all those people who had Amazon reviews and we try to match them, or they wrote us letters, direct messages in social or emails. And I go back to every single one of them and I said, hey, we heard you. We fixed this. Please send me your address. I'm going to send you a bottle for free, no charge. Would love to hear your thoughts on the newest formula. And they go to you like, wait, you listened and you made a change to the product? And all of a sudden it's like, boom. So it's this situation where, yeah, it's very manual, but you have a customer base that will sing it from the rooftops when you have pleased them, because it's like once you build that trust, you're sort of on the inside at that point. You're a trusted brand. And so we did a tremendous job of trying to keep a squeaky clean reputation across the board, because we wanted to be seen as a really trusted brand. And so I think when you also have these conversations or longer conversations with customers, and they reach out and they know that, hey, I can reach out. I'm going to talk to a person. I'm going to talk to a person that's actually at this company and not at some hired firm. And then I'm going to get results from it. And that starts to kind of leach itself out into, mom discussion groups on Facebook. And then, your grassroots style of exposure through like, hey, I have a mommy group locally that there's 10 different moms in it. And we're all talking about what's going on about being a parent. Hey, all of a sudden this starts to come up as a brand that's trusted. And it's an amazing thing. I still get letters to this day, honestly, from customers that are like, your products have changed our life and changed our household.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you're scaling a brand, right, there are things that you should do that are not scalable, right? Both internally and externally. Like I'm a big fan of doing things that are not scalable with how we treat our team internally and how we manage our team. Doing things that are not scalable with how we work with our clients. I write a handwritten card to every client when we start working with them, and I kind of have this list of people I send cards to on a monthly basis, just things that come up that I'm aware of that are going on in their business or in their life. And it's very much not scalable, and I always feel like I'm behind on it, if I'm honest with you. But it's meaningful, right? And actually, interestingly enough, I was so passionate about that when I started Free to Grow 3 years ago. Like, our purpose is to build a profitable business that truly cares for people. That's our purpose statement. And it's important because we do it through e-commerce finance. That's how we care for brand founders. But having that as our purpose reminds me that, like, how are we caring for people by making this decision, by taking this action? And I'm just like a big believer in the fact that when you build an organization that actually has that soul in one way, shape, or form, it just performs better. People are happier, and it makes a true difference in the world. And at the end of the day, like, that's the beautiful thing about business, is that it's something, yes, it can create financial wealth it can create financially positive results for everybody involved, right? But it can actually make the world a better place above and beyond that, in terms of how it changes the world from a product and service perspective, how it changes your employees' lives. And I just think that's really cool. One thing I was thinking about as you were talking, and I was thinking about scaling a brand, some of the things that I've seen at Guardian Bikes and that I see our clients who are scaling dealing with all the time, is like, you're seeing success on the marketing side, you're acquiring new customers, you're getting repeat customers, your sales are going through the roof, and inevitably there's operational bottlenecks or potential operational bottlenecks, because now all of a sudden supply has to keep up, right? And then furthermore, when you're trying to scale from a bootstrapped perspective, that means you don't have deep outside equity investor pockets to go to when inventory purchases start tying up more cash on the balance sheet. So two things. The first one is negotiating with and partnering with your suppliers how did you work with them on both pricing and I would say equally as important payment terms so that you could finance the increasing purchases you're having to make to keep up?
Yeah, I love that question because it's so important to the growth of the business. And so, couple points on that. So one, you know, like with DadMode, we use the same bottle size. Obviously, it's pre-printed, it's custom. But with Puracy, we use plastic bottles that were labeled, and we ended up sharing a lot of bottles across the product line. So we had a lot of shared components across multiple products, which was helpful because you could purchase at larger quantities and you weren't overloading on inventory of bottles. You didn't have 12 different bottles, you had like 3 or 4. So that was one. The second one, which, then you look down the list of where are your largest expenses, and obviously that's contract manufacturing. So we went into our contract manufacturer, which was our second one because the first one we outgrew quite quickly. And we had to give them some runway first. We had to start moving some product over. And obviously you keep that close to the vest because for a host of reasons, really. But then, once you get a couple of POs under your belt, they see that you're paying on time. They see that your POs are getting larger. It gives you an opportunity to kind of go in and say, just tell your story. And so we did. We literally went up there physically, met with them, saw their facility, saw our products getting run, and then sat down with ownership and said, look, here's who we are. We chose you guys because you have a history of taking smaller brands and making them big. So Baby Gaddix was like their big claim to fame, that they helped scale them to exit. And I said, you need to kind of work with us from the standpoint of we are bootstrapped. We don't intend to raise money. We want to continue to grow profitably. What can we do from this right at the time we were net 30? And what the situation started at, which was a leverage point, was, hey, we're going to run larger production runs, but we need the first half of it, or whatever we send to Amazon, let's say. We'll pay you net 30 on those because we know we're going to sell them fast. But the other half, we need to, one, store them at your facility, and two, pay net 60 on. And so, we had some back and forth on it and credit checks and this and that. And they ended up saying, okay, we'll work with it here. And then as we grew beyond that, we got into the position where, the numbers got bigger. And again, I think it was critical that we stayed current all the time on our payments.
Yeah.
So you obviously have to have your forecasting down and kind of really know your business. And we ended up moving to net 60 on the whole count. And that was a real critical juncture for the brand to be able to cash flow things, because you could turn that product and could pay it off in a timely basis because of how, as you know, like Amazon, it's net 2 or 3, and they pay fast. So that was a really important part, I think, to allowing us to go ahead and scale.
Yeah, that super key. Like, for everyone listening, your partnership with your key suppliers is it is one of the most important relationships that you have to maintain as you're scaling a bootstrapped brand, because things change for them, things change for you, and open communication lines are key. I'm even seeing, with the tariffs that recently went in place, like the first move that we're advising everyone to do is sit down with your suppliers and talk about how we can get through the next 30, 60, 90 days together, right? Because it's in everyone's best interest to keep the relationship, right? And they're an extension of you. And so that's a great story and really great advice on how to maintain, how to think about partnering with your factory as you continue to scale to make sure that payment terms are working for your bootstrapped brand. I want to go now to DadMode. So walk me through kind of the birth of DadMode and what you guys are all about.
So when we sold Puracy, I remained on for effectively 30 months to run the brand. There were a number of incentives sort of tied to me. So it made sense. And frankly, I wanted to. I didn't think that my job was down there. It was just more in a situation where we had the ability to join a much larger company with a lot more resources. That's something that I never had before. It also gave me the time to open up my mind because I had been so dialed into Puracy for so long that I hadn't thought about any other businesses. And, over the course of a few months post-acquisition, I came up with 40 or so business ideas that I jotted down. And I honed in on this one for a couple of reasons. Again, it goes back to know what you know what you don't know. You'll find something you're good at it and make money with it. But I think it intersected an interesting point in the market where COVID had happened. Hybrid work environment was at full speed at that point. And what you saw was this accelerated shift of dads contributing more around the household. They were just naturally, it's like if dad is taking Zoom calls from the bedroom, dad's going to chip in with dishes or laundry or taking the kids to school. And that set off a light bulb. And so I did some consumer research with dads in that demo. And start to go through the whole thing and you start to kind of draw these parallels hey, remember what men's grooming was like 10, 15 years ago? It was nothing. And now it's enormous. There's brands everywhere. There's 2 aisles at Target, 2 aisles at Walmart. And so you start to go down this path and then you realize there are these hot buttons for dads where, being a superhero in your kid's mind was like a 10 out of 10 for every single dad. Being a great father in your spouse's mind was like a 10 out of 10, every single dad. And so what we realized was dads are willing to chip in more around the house. Things have changed fast, even though now a lot of dads are back in the office. And there were no brands that were speaking to them. They're like, yeah, I'm using Mrs. Meyer's lemon verbena, or I'm using 7th generation citrus. And it's like, okay, I'll do it. And that's fine. But yeah, it would be a lot nicer if I could use something that was catered towards me. And then there's the element around scent. There's an element around, hey, these products have to work extremely well. And then this whole, sort of cherry on top, there were 2 cherries on top. And one was around sort of this growing concern around microplastics, and really the fact that all plastic that we use, most of it's not recycled. Overwhelming majority is not recycled. And it goes into landfills and it leaches into our water systems and then it ends up in our drinking supply. And so I saw this opportunity for metal, aluminum, to become the savior there. And then the top one was really, how do we sort of portray this? And how do we get men to give a shit about this? And there was this growing body of data around men who do more chores around the house get laid more. And so it became this thing where well, all right, men are animals, again. And they want to have a better relationship with their kids and their wife. And this is sort of the catalyst that can kind of be there. They're already doing it. We're not asking them. We're certainly not trying to tell them to do an hour more per day at work. So we made these products as easy to use and as easy to be as effective in the shortest amount of time possible. And then also, layering on this nice masculine scent to kind of show that dad did the work. So that's really how the brand idea was born. There's a lot of other sort of nuances around it, but I saw this and I kind of said, hey, I'm living this right now. I feel like I could be a great spokesperson because I understand the target demographic really well.
So I'm curious. One thing that you mentioned in prepping for chatting today is valuable content that resonates with your audience. So when you think about DadMode and you've gone through the process of finding content that really connects with your audience, walk me through kind of high level your process and what you found.
It's a lot of fun, honestly. And that was one of the things that stuck out because the Puracy brand built a really clinical brand through a lot of product reviews and expert testimonials from doctors. And we had a couple of doctors on our staff that would answer questions and write blogs. And that was all fine and dandy, but we had no social presence. And the world has shifted a lot since I started that brand. And what I saw was people were just yearning for humorous education, edutainment type of content. They want real, they want raw, they want honest. They don't want this sort of polished Instagram lifestyle. And I think that's why TikTok has exploded. It's because people just want this genuine connection They want to look on the other side of the camera and see like, okay, that's a normal person, right? They don't need filters and they're not using all this makeup and special themes and that's what we saw was like, hey, if we can create this as an example, chore play, right? Dads who clean more get laid more. Have this sort of suggestive humor that makes dads laugh when they kind of view our content. If we can have stuff that's like really dumbed down to kind of show, hey, you can spend 5 minutes a week pre-treating your laundry, and like your wife is gonna love you because they don't pull out your son's shirt and there's like a giant stain in the middle. And it's literally as simple as going through the entire laundry pile, spraying the stain, and then cleaning it whenever you get around to it. There's no special formula that you have to do in scrubbing, and it's just wait, let the product do its job. So, teaching them how to do that, really kind of dumbing it down, because a lot of dads just don't know. And then, all the other humor, and I think, what we're trying to build into is this resonance about how to be a better dad, how to kind of spend more quality time with your kids, and just different examples of doing that. And that's really the underlying theme that we're trying to build here on a larger movement scale is really trying to get dads to be more engaged. And again, like I think we're the leading generation to do this because our dads weren't that involved, most of them generally speaking. And now the dads kind of have access to a lot more resources around, oh, okay, this is what it looks like. We kind of want to be out there talking about it just a little bit more.
I love it. That vision and purpose is near and dear to my heart as a dad of a 6'4" and 2-year-old who's building a business working from home. So I truly love that. I'm curious now, having scaled more than one brand and exited one successfully and having the rigor around profitability because of bootstrapping. From your perspective, you're like imagine yourself sitting across the table from a first-time e-com brand founder who doesn't necessarily know the difference. To you, how valuable is clean financial reporting and like a CFO or CFO level advice as you're scaling a bootstrapped brand?
I'll put it this way. In some other interviews I've done, people ask me like, hey, what's the biggest regret you had with Puracy? And my number one answer, unequivocally every time, not hiring a CFO sooner. We got into when we moved into retail, that was sort of phase one of it getting pretty sticky because we had to reduce our retails. And then when I say reduce our retails, that was reduce our retails for retail and online. And our cash conversion cycles went to hell because retail is a joke. And then you have to hold a lot more inventory. And then COVID hit. And then trying to buy components in the early parts of COVID. And then, as I mentioned before, we shared bottles, for instance. We shared sprayers and closures. So you might order it for one product, and then you get bumped back in line. And then all of a sudden, you now have 5 products out of stock because you can't buy enough bottles. And then once you say, okay, we're going to buy more, we're going to triple our order. We're going to just sit on a ton of inventory. Then your marketing team's like, where'd my budget go? And you're like, well, Bootstrap, don't have it. So that's always been my number one call out was a CFO has to be there. And then when I look at it from DadMode, we, just so happens because I trust him and what he did towards the end of that business at Puracy to help us get to exit was big. We brought on our former Puracy CFO to be a financial, to be a formal advisor to the company because him and I work so well and together. And he knows the landscape. He's worked in CPG almost his entire career and empowerment. And then we also hired a accountant / controller on a fractional basis. And when we went out and we did our friends and family seed raise, people were like, whoa, you guys are really buttoned up. And I said, you can't not be. You absolutely have to be. It's, especially now when we don't have these, like you said, back in 2015, 2014 with Amazon, it was kind of awesome, right? You kind of put stuff on there and you get some reviews and things sold. And now it's, there's like 15 ads on every page. So everything is very expensive. And now you have all the big players have woken up. So I think you have to be extremely disciplined in that fashion from a financial standpoint. And you might have push and pull. You should, frankly. The CFO is. I have a friend who's CFO. He says he is the king of unpopular opinions. That is how he kind of titles his role. But it is for a reason, and you have to respect them for what they're doing for your organization. Their job is don't run out of money. That is
For
their job.
sure. Well, and
So
actually, if you think about it, like one way to describe what is the role of a CFO, they're the chief capital allocator in your business. And if you are bootstrapped, that means inherently by saying we're bootstrapped, there's a finite amount of capital to allocate. So there's a trade-off to every dollar you allocate to one area of the business. That means it can't be allocated to another, right? And so it's of the utmost importance, and obviously that's why we do what we do at Free to Grow CFO. Not having that advice makes running a brand, which is already stressful, way more stressful. And we're here to help remove some of that stress by giving guidance and solutions to, capital allocation constraints and trade-offs. So, unfortunately, we got to land the plane here. But before we do, I'm curious. I always like to ask a personal question on the show. And I'm curious, for you, what's a little known fact about Sean that people might find shocking or surprising?
goodness. Um, so I think, look, I'm very passionate about great, safe cleaning products that are good for the environment. Um, I'm passionate about the sort of plastic movement or anti-plastic movement, and that's why we created aluminum bottles and single-use refill pouches that weigh almost nothing. But I love cars and I love gas-powered cars. I've always been a car guy. Like there's a line that I will be the last holdout for an electric vehicle. I get them, I understand them. I think they're great for the people that care about them, but there's something about the roar of a V8 that just gets my blood going. And I know they're not great for the environment. I work from home, so I don't put a lot of miles on it. But I used to have a diesel truck, same thing. So that's like one of the things that, as passionate as I am, um, there are limits.
We can't be perfect, man. We all have our things. And as the founder of a brand called DadMode, I feel like it's okay that you like gas-powered vehicles. Well, Sean, this was amazing. For all of you out there listening, you might want to listen to this one a couple times. This is chocked full of really awesome advice about how to scale not just one, but two, bootstrap brands. Before we do break here, though, where can people find more information about you and about your brand, DadMode?
Yeah, so for me, obviously this podcast and LinkedIn. For Dad Mode, it's godadmode.com. We also sell on Amazon and we also sell on TikTok Shop. So those are the three areas you can find us. We should be moving into retail stores next spring. And
Awesome.
it's going to be an exciting position for us to be in. That's really why we built the brand the way we did, was to launch online, get a ton of data, and use that to help craft our content and acquisition strategy as we head into a retail partner in 26. So I think that sort of covers it. But yeah, we built out our website to be pretty detailed and rigorous and should cover everything. But again, it's one of those things where we are always keeping our ear to the ground. And if you want to learn something new about our products and it's not up there, then we'll make content on it. If you want to see it used in a certain way, we'll make content on it. And for now, for the foreseeable future, I will be the one talking to you on the other side of the computer. So don't be a stranger.
I love it, man. Definitely check out DadMode. I'm probably gonna have to check it out by virtue of running a business from home. There's this joke actually. I'll sweep the whole house when I'm on a call that I don't have to be on video. I'm on my phone, and Andrew, my wife, will come home and go, "Oh, were you on some calls today? Because the house is all swept." So yeah, I'm your target market, man. I'm gonna check it out for sure. So appreciate you coming on. And look, everyone, don't forget, if you want more helpful tips on scaling a profit-focused D2C brand, consider following me, Jon Blair, on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in learning more about how Free to Grow's D2C accountants and fractional CFOs can help your brand increase profit and cash flow as you scale, check us out at freetogrowcfo.com. And until next time, scale on. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, John.